It looks like we're being live streamed.
Well, we are live, Investment Committee, and as I was saying, we'll go through the agenda and discuss the Commissioner's Fund and discuss distribution amounts. And from there, Jim, I'll let you kick it off.
Super. Well, we'll call the meeting to order, and glad to appreciate all of those in attendance. Mr. John Nyer, Mr. Steve Pullman, myself, Jim Getz, and also our CFO, Craig Sherman. So we are all present and accounted for. Thank you. We'll move right into this then. Minutes from the April 27 meeting. Were there any changes or corrections that anyone noticed in those minutes?
I noticed nothing, and I would make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Second? I'll second. So all of those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you very much. Well, Craig, we're going to kick it right back to you here. Now you can talk about our distribution if you would.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go and jump to the actual document on the meeting invite, and I'm going to go to the third page. It's the looking at the park board budget, Commissioner's Fund budget, and the expense types. Back in fiscal year 2022, the adjusted budget, and the reason why we have adjusted budgets is we'll have items come in from usually the Parks Foundation that have additional costs, so we adjust the budget to reflect those additional items. So we had adjusted budget of $2,111,000. And then looking at our fiscal 23 budget, it's a budget of $1,822,295. A couple of the key items that we're seeing decreases in is inventory for the Crone gift shop, the purchasing of for inventory. That's something that it may get adjusted depending on when DCL is hired. That's one area where we saw a decrease in sales, and we're hoping we are going to address that in fiscal 23. But it really depends on when the DCL is hired. Additionally, you'll see some horticultural supplies decreases there. A lot of that, a couple of those I want to highlight is the operations admin just decreasing closer to a run rate. Butterfly show, just really looking at the butterfly show in the fiscal 22 ran in July and August. That cost us have additional port supplies. So that is not occurring. So we're not seeing that need there for fiscal year 23. Then you have a couple projects that had reductions. Trail signage, reductions there, just removal of trail signs that was allocated from last year, taking them out of the budget. And the big one is the Burnett Woods. We have an invasive species removal contract that's seeing a decent reduction in that invasive species removal as invoices come in. Now that's the projected decrease, because as invoices are processed in June, we'll fully understand what that's going to look like. So Jim, in our next board meeting, that may adjust depending on how many invoices paid out in June. Then we have the removal of the Carter's Grove project, but then one increase that we're going to have is the Eden Park. So after the Tom Jones, the additional capital dollars are used to invest in that infrastructure. We're going to contract out maintenance for Tom Jones Common in fiscal year 23. So that could be a repeat for next fiscal 24 too.
So that's what you're estimating on an ongoing basis, that it'll cost us $55,000 a year to farm out the maintenance of Tom Jones?
That could be a little high because the first year is going to take a lot more commitment than after the actual Tom Jones is established.
Got it. Thank you. And just for clarity, said differently on all of this, is that this budget can adjust throughout the year if additional revenues are received or additional gifts are received. Typically, we'll put those in here, and then the expense will come out of these as well. So Looks pretty straightforward to me, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank,
Moving.
I would,
Yes.
a simple question is this stuff is largely on the cash basis, I guess. That's why we expense the inventory purchases and expense all the supplies versus when we might use those and deplete those. So,
Yes.
yeah, but otherwise I agree with Jim. Pretty straightforward, easy to understand.
Moving down, I kind of definitely wanted to highlight these are the dollars that are available in the Commissioners Fund. This doesn't include any trust fund dollars. So for the overall projected ending balance for the restricted and unrestricted is going to be $4,745,000. This is largely contingent on how much of the encumbered money for fiscal year 22 is actually paid out of with invoices. What occurs is we will have operations once in a while will submit encumbrance requests, but then they do not actually utilize the money. And if that occurs, those dollars are released back into that Commissioners Fund to be used, to reapply and be used again in fiscal 23, or it just goes back into the fund all itself. That could be influenced definitely by the time we get to the meeting in July. Projected revenue, projecting out, and this is something I will need to adjust, is $1,207,000. Budgeted expenses is at $1.8 million. And then our projected ending revenue for June 30th, 2023 is $4,130,000. And again, that could be adjusted based on new revenue coming in. But if you notice, I sent out an update, and this is not reflective of that update, where Fifth Third authorized a larger amount of distribution than I was anticipating.
Craig, if you would indulge me for a second, I'd like to ask some more questions just so I understand the format here.
Yes.
So when we're looking at the top half of this sheet where we have 4,745,000, that's total Commissioners Fund consolidated with all the accounts, right?
Correct.
So if you look at the last page of the packet that you sent us, where we have the typical presentation starting at the top with the Bettman account going all the way down to a grand total. You see which one I'm talking about, so that we've got May 22 balances. If you go to the commissioner dollars, it says 5,288,267 at the end of May.
Yes.
So you're saying, you're projecting that we will, if we had actual numbers, you're projecting that the next column would have been June 22, and you're estimating instead of 5,288,000, we would see the 4,745,000.
Yes, contingent on how much money was spent out of the Commissioners Fund in June, as well as salary reimbursements.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure we just have a salary reimbursement kick out today, depending on, more likely that's not going to come out of the Commissioners Fund. That's going to increase our balance. So that 4,745,000 could be 5 million, could be 5.1 million, depending on what occurs in the month of June.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I'm getting the connection between the different ones. So then we'll go back to the page you were just talking about with the totals up at the top. The part at the bottom where it says account 2 with a grand total projected at June 30 of 1,385,527. You see that
Yes.
column? Where would that number show up on that last page that we just looked at of the balances? Is that what you call our money market account, or where is that 1.3?
It's a combination of all of it. So within the PNC Bank account, the 3 accounts, the 4.7 million that includes the 1.4 million is within all 3 of those accounts. They're just separated out within our QuickBooks that shows what each of them, the balance of each of them is. And that account too is just to illustrate the balances of the trust funds that the investment committee is meets obviously quarterly, usually sometimes with the investment managers. So this is strictly to show how much money is available in those balances of those trusts that we manage.
Okay, so again, I'm just trying to get this in perspective. If the 1.385 balance projected at the end of the year is all of our endowment funds, then the let's call it 3.3, or it's 3.3 or 3.4, the difference between the 4.7 at the top and the 1.4 at the bottom, what is that money?
That money is revenue from other sources, such as the Crone gift shop sales. We have a Crone gift in there of $500,000 as well. We have dollars from other avenues, such as Alt Park.
Okay, okay, so let me, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but so what I'm understanding then is that the difference, that let's call it 3.4 million, are other commissioner fund line items that have balances unspent in them, such as Crone, whatever, I can't remember all the different line items, but that's all the other ones where we've got accumulated revenue in there above what's sitting in the endowment funds. Am I totally confused?
No, you're correct. So you have the endowment fund balances, and the rest of the balance is from other revenues or other potential funds that came in from the Parks Foundation that are assigned to different restrictions or potentially unrestricted dollars.
Is there any one very large item in there that I'm missing, or is this just an accumulation of a lot of balance?
Your largest item is going to be Crone, and that's pretty much $1 million, because we have Crone gift shop is around 575,000. That's their fund balance. And then you have another large one. Well, that's 575 for the gift shop. You also have a 500,000 donation for Crone in there as well. So Crone's at $1,075,000. Then there's another large donation of the Green Oak property. This is for Labredo Woods and Tanglewood. That's $321,000.
Okay, I got it. So I'm assuming the other two of you are smarter than I am. So what we're saying is, of that 3.4 million not sitting in endowment funds, it is accumulated revenue that has not been spent for specific items, of which 1.1 is the biggest one, which is Crone. And then there's a number of other smaller identified funds that have accumulated revenues that have been unspent.
And some of these aren't particular accumulated revenue. Some of these were just direct donations for the park to use for a specific purpose, just like the $320,000 for the Labredo and Green. That was just a donation for trails.
Okay.
That occurred years ago that they never applied the money for that purpose.
Okay.
And Crystal's team is well aware of that. I've informed now of the available dollars there.
Okay, I think I've got it, Craig. So,
Jim, I would not at all say that. Well, I can speak for myself. I won't speak for Steve. I would say I don't pretend to have the capacity to track fund accounting and detail in the way that you consistently and admirably do. So I am not. I follow. I do think it could be relevant in broader conversations. What's revenue versus what's gift in terms of classification of funds, but that's kind of
Yeah.
That's not really in the purview of investment committee per se, I would think, but that is conceivably relevant in other applications.
Super.
I
Then,
have an easy question, Craig. I think we've covered this. In addition to what Jim just walked us through with respect to the non kind of endowment funds, the $1.4 million itself, the $1,385,000, that all got there based on whatever distribution formula we used over the years, and we haven't spent it, and we project that we'll still have $1.2 million of that at the end of the next fiscal year. Is this whole, I think I probably have asked this a couple times, the whole commissioner's fund, is it all really invested in money market? And would we ever move it back out of the commissioner's fund into, the 60/40 portfolio? Have we ever, or eventually, is this money earmarked and we know we're going to spend it even if we don't spend it in fiscal 2023? So kind of twofold. Is the whole $5 million basically, fairly liquid stuff? And since we periodically have a buildup where we don't need the 5% distribution, do we ever transfer it back?
So for the 4.7 million, that, per discussing this with law, we should be following, and we are following, Ohio Revised Code 135.14. So meaning it should immediately be able to be liquid. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be liquidated, but we need to be following that code.
Yeah.
So, but for us, it is dollars that can easily be liquidated and used. And one thing that we've used this for and did a good job last year was when I look at the fund balance of 1.2 million, I would say, is there opportunities for us to utilize that, especially the unrestricted, or even unrestricted, to utilize that to better support our capital improvement needs within the system. And last year we did that. We applied, I believe it was close to $1 million out of, I overestimated. I added a couple other items in there, 100,000, about $500,000 towards capital needs. And then also additional fleet needs, $700,000 for fleet needs were utilized.
I do remember that conversation, and I remember the discussion about how that was it was a better use of it. It's already there. It's liquid, and spend that on some of the needs you just mentioned, rather than having to liquidate and spend money that was earning 12 or 14% on that type of stuff.
And we're going through the exercise. When I come back from vacation, we'll go through an exercise identifying, is there other opportunities with Joel and his team, who's our new manager of the planning design team. Is there opportunities to utilize some of these dollars to help out, and especially with these restricted dollars, utilizing those even unrestricted to help out with any capital needs?
That makes sense. I think I only ask the question about the total commissioner dollars approximately 4 times a year. So at each of the quarterly meetings.
And let me also, so that we always remember these things. To your second question, Steve, can it be reinvested? We have done that once in my tenure here. We did the first year I was on the board. We sent back to Capital, or sent back to Corpus. I think it was either 1.1 or 1.3 million. I always want to remember that we have done that, because that also represents funds that could be withdrawn today for use should we need those funds. The other, and I want to make sure that we get that comment in the minutes so we don't lose that. Also, Craig, today, part of that 4.7 million Steve, you'll remember we have that in a money market account. Besides the endowment balances that are in trust and invested 60/40, we've got a money market account. Craig, in the discussions that are going on today, is it being discussed that we would liquidate that money market account or not?
Well, as in liquidate, as in bringing. So discussion is, and this was confirmed, is so we have three accounts. We have a money market, we have a checking account, we have a money market account, and we have what's called the investment account. All three of those create the 4.7 million.
Yes.
All three of those need to follow or do follow the Ohio Revised Code 135.14.
Yes.
Within that code, though, you could get held, like if you invest a certain way, depending like government bonds and that, I mean, you can tie up your money for a long time. Because of that, and this is items that we would want to be able to liquidate fairly fast. Right now, it's mainly just sitting in like a money market or a swipe account, not earning a whole lot of interest.
And so we are not being asked to move that money market account out of PNC?
The city would like us to move all three accounts into the city, the full 4.7 million. And then that's what the city would like to do.
Which would then preclude us earning money on what is in that money market account today, correct?
We would earn interest based on the city's investment policy then.
And do we have a sense for what that is? Because you remember when we were looking at the amped fund and the gross spec fund, it sat there for a number of years and did not accrue any interest.
I can share the city's, it's very low interest, and I can share the city's investment policy, because that's, if the money would move from the PNC account to there, that's what we would follow, the city's investment policy, which is different, slightly different than the Ohio Revised Code.
But said differently, when you said we would follow it, at that point,
the city would then, rather than us having it invested in a PNC money market account and ensuring whatever it is invested in. And this is, I'm stating it just so the other people on the committee understand this. The city is asking us to move that PNC account to a city bank account, which then in essence means that we then would have, as it stood at the end of May 22nd, we had 1.68 million invested in a money market account at PNC. If what the city is asking us to do is to move that fund to a city bank account, and then we would get whatever the city is paying out to funds based on their investment. Have I said that correctly, Craig? Yes.
Okay.
They just want that particular component of the commissioner's fund, not the entire.
They want the entire.
They want all, I want to clarify that they want all three of the accounts that are held at PNC. It would be the 600,000, 1.7, and 3, because that makes up the full what's sitting at PNC. Yeah. That came from distributions or revenue from gift shop sales or other sources. But they do not want to touch any of the other actual trust funds. They don't, those would stay with Park Board.
Okay, that's just the one thing that I just want to make sure that the commissioners are aware of next meeting when this comes before the commissioners. I want to make sure they recognize that the piece of these, what I will call funds not needed immediately for investment.
Yeah.
We have been sticking 1.1. So at the end of May, it was 1.7 of the 5.3 total, we were putting into a money market account, earning whatever was being earned there. Going forward, that will be invested at whatever the city gets on their invested funds.
And what will that be invested like in a 60-40 portfolio, or will it be in something more liquid like this?
I can share with you the investment policy, then I can follow up, Steve, with kind of what their breakout is as a city.
That'd be great, Craig.
And my assumption is that it's a fairly, it offers a fairly modest rate of return based on being essentially just cash.
Money market, yeah. Well, you can see though, over the course, yeah, it's just going to be, it's a money market rate. But, well, wait, Craig, we had money market rate, but we did have a distribution there. It was invested not just in bonds, right? This was also, I can't remember if it was 50-50 or how it was invested, but I know it was not just fixed income. How is the money market account?
The money market is a money market, then, and as well as a checking account, very small checking account. The investment account, that's the one that was you're looking at like a 60-40, but it has been changed to follow Ohio Revised Code.
Which is what? So we've already changed the investment account.
Yes.
So that's the 3 million at the end of May 22nd.
Yeah, and 750,000 was also moved into the money market account. When we liquidate from the money market account to bring it to the Fifth Third account.
Right.
That's why that was brought over.
Okay, so in my thinking, I was a little mixed up here. It's actually the investment account that is invested, and that is invested how now, Craig?
Right now I can follow up with PNC. We should be following the Ohio Revised Code. And
yeah, but what does that mean?
That means it's going to be in more secure. Right now it's probably more in cash because I haven't provided much guidance on that yet. Because I'm waiting to see if we're going to be moving it over to the city.
Okay.
And maybe you covered this. Why does it have to be moved from one money market into another?
For it to be moved to the city or within the accounts? Well, this is for both.
Yeah, why can't it just stay where it is? What does this accomplish?
With the city, primarily they're looking at money being held outside of the city's Fifth Third account, even though it has the city's EIN. They would like for it to be moved into the city's purview. This way they have ability to see it cleaner. They can see it already. We have to share statements, as well as it would like for us to follow what the state of Ohio would like us to do is utilize the money or put in like a full budget within the city system versus having right now we have a budget in the city system, but also we have the commissioner's fund budget that's outside the city system.
Got it.
And it would also prevent us from being probably audited by the state. Which we purchase everything through the city's procurement process. Anyways.
So I have sufficiently sidetracked us into a sidetrack issue that does impact our investments, but I wanted you all to understand what is being asked. Now, to finish that line of reasoning, the MOU that was signed actually said we could have the PNC accounts. So that's something we'll have to visit with the city if they are requiring us to move these funds. Okay. Craig, one other question I had, if you could provide to us. I see it's very clear the expense side of what you're showing us, where you are projecting or will present, I guess, to the commissioners a budget expense line for 2023 of the $1.8 million. Can you give us a comparison where you've got projected revenue today, and I know you've got to update this, but you have, I'm sorry, projected revenue of 1.2 million. Can you give us what the actual 2022 revenue was that came into the account?
Oh, I can provide that. Let me see if we have our books updated with May information. Give me 1 second.
I'm just curious how the 1.2 of projected revenues compares.
Did you mean fiscal 22, Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we've got the comparison here where we saw that our budget expenses for 22 was 2.1 million. And we're comparing that now to the 1.8 that we're projecting for next year. I just want to see how the revenue.
I'm just pulling up our revenue tracker.
Okay.
And if that doesn't have it, then I can run a QuickBooks report and get you the exact amount.
Yeah, I don't need it today if that's complicated. I'm just curious.
Let me see. Let's see. No, I'll have to follow up and look at the QuickBooks because I'm looking at our revenue tracking sheet and it doesn't look like it's been reconciled yet. And I don't want to provide any incorrect information.
Okay. Because if you give us that number, what was the fiscal year 22 revenue total? That way we can compare 22 revenue and expense to 23 projected revenue and expense.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you could also give us a breakdown, Craig, your projected revenue for the year, and I know you're going to adjust that because you're going to adjust what Fifth Third is going to distribute, but based on this, you had 1.2 total revenue. The old number before Fifth Third came in with their adjusted number, the endowment funds were going to kick out 669 of that 1.2. If you're looking at that first page again, with the totals at the top and then the endowment funds at the bottom, you'll see the endowment funds in what you had sent out earlier was going to generate $669,735 of the 1.2 total revenue. So if you could give us what's the difference there? What else is going in there? I know some of that is revenue from the Crone. There's revenue that comes in, but I'm just curious what other items make up, because that's a third. No, it's almost half of what the revenue is.
Yeah, your major ticket items outside of that, there's going to be obviously your Chrome gift shop that's projected at 175,000, and then looking at like the alt park distributions that we receive from the Parks Foundation is around 76,000.
Alt Park we receive from whom?
Parks Foundation.
Okay.
And then you have these other items like the Pipe Park from the condos down around there is 43,000.
Okay.
So yeah, I can provide a breakout of
that would
the
be
other ones.
that would be good to understand.
Yeah. And then, we also put the BOV money in there. So just putting a projection of 120,000, which I'm hoping is going to be a lot higher.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you, Craig. So now that I got us all completely off the track, go back to where you were leading us, I believe, to the distribution review.
So, yes. So with the next page, looking at the distribution review, and I was able to send this part out with the added. This is something received late in the afternoon yesterday from Fifth Third in regards to the Meyer and the Hawk funds. So as for myself, I inputted a ask of 2%, the highlighted part. So if you look at the top part, the funds that we control, the investment committee controls the recommendations of usually between 1% to 5% distribution. I highlighted if we do a 2% distribution, it would be a distribution of $216,351. And then obviously the below ones, those are a mandatory 5% distribution. And you'll see where the Meyer fund went from projected 285,585 to 400,000. The Hawk Fund Fountain Square went from 90,572 to 100,000. And then the Hawk Fund City Acres went from 32,148 to 40,000. And then the Fleshman, that is handled on the U.S. Bank side, and at a 5% distribution, that would be $45,078. So total 5% distribution is $585,070. If you look at based on restricted and unrestricted distribution, heavily driven by the Meyer Fund distribution, is $604,313, with the restricted fund of $197,117. And that was heavily driven by the Fountain Square distribution of $100,000. Meaning total overall distribution is $801,429.
So the comment that I would make, if you go back again now to the top page that we've been looking at with the projected revenues and expense for the year, plugging in these new numbers, you'll see we still have the projected balance at June 30. And again, I'm just looking at the endowment of funds of $1,385,000. We're projecting revenue now based on these new numbers of $801,000, which would then put our projected balance at June 30, 23, instead of the 1.189, that will now come out to 1,321,000. So when you look at that, we're basically gonna go from 1,385,000 to 1,321,000, which means that we're going to spend what we generate. Which, if we take this, where I'm heading with this question is for us. Do we, now that we move, and I guess part of this is when we see what we will be earning if we move this money over to the city, do we decide to leave some invested in our endowment funds at the 60-40 level? Or do we distribute them and not drive down our existing unspent balance, I guess, and not earn on that difference? I don't know if I'm being clear to you guys, but
if we have cash that has been previously distributed that has not been entirely utilized, and we're going to be putting it in city funds where we anticipate a lower rate of return, perhaps not dramatically, perhaps I don't know the differential, but does it make sense to further draw out of the more highly returning funds just to keep extra cash. Is that kind of the root question?
Exactly, John.
And I track that and would tend to think, and that also supports another, if you don't project needing the cash in sooner order, I'm not sure any time from the past 60 days to now is a time I would prefer to sell anyway. And I'm not trying to get into the business of market timing, but I don't necessarily know that I don't feel a compelling need to generate cash because our projected cash needs are already covered to a slight surplus.
And let me say it a different way. In Craig, your initial budget here, which contemplated the lower Fifth Third distribution, we were going to be spending down some of this unspent balance because we were going to go from the 1.3 at the beginning of the year down to 1.1 at the end of the year. So I would just entertain the discussion about, so if we're getting $131,000 more from Fifth Third than we had anticipated, which we can't control, that's set. Should we move down to 1%, which is $108,000 less coming out of our invested funds, or even say zero from our own invested funds?
What did you say the market was going to do, John?
It only goes up. That's my understanding. I'm pretty sure.
You know, I do think there's some merit. I was going to ask, did we have to take that 400,000? It sounds like that is dictated by that committee, that council. And you're right. I mean, it's not like the 1,189,000 where we were heading was low for our anticipated need. I would think there may be some merit into just doing the 1%, or especially knowing what's going to happen to the commissioner's fund and the next fiscal year, right? Which kind of goes back to where we were 10 or 15 minutes ago. Once it's in here, do you have the ability to move it back? You certainly have the ability not to distribute from the endowment funds into the commissioner's fund, and that would seem to kind of hang together. If you're getting more than you thought from the Fifth Third distribution, you don't have to take 2% or more from the other. At the same time, it's only $100,000, right? 100 to 110, but that's really where I was going before. Wouldn't this money be better in the 60-40? I mean, it's going to come back someday, and you want to have it in there when it comes back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the dilemma we're facing at the moment.
And investment committee, I do want to clarify, city law, we are, for that 60-40, we are now following that Ohio revised code. So the 60-40 is no longer, we're following the Ohio revised code, that 135.14.
I think Steve meant, though, even the 4.7, I think part of Steve's question initially was, could any of that go back into the endowment funds themselves? And I think we found out when we did that in the past that was a little shaky to do anyway, because I don't know that those trusts can accept back. We've never pursued that, but that's why I keep reminding everybody that we sent 1.3 back that is available to withdraw.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you're bringing that up, Jim, because once we're all potentially gone, whomever is going to remember that. I mean, they're gonna have to look through documentation and identify it. So, and maybe not at this time, but at some point, I think we probably should have that serious conversation of bringing it back.
Well, and that's why I asked that it be in the minutes, just because of that. I want to make sure people don't forget that. And we definitely will not be able to have the flexibility, I believe, if once this goes over to the city account, I think it's going to be very difficult. Right now, we are using our own discretion to say, okay, we've got 4.7 million sitting or whatever it is, say 4.7 million sitting in endowment funds. We know that we're not going to need all that, so we've been using part of that to be invested. To Craig's point, he's changed that to a more liquid investment, but it was some investment that we had been doing, which we won't be able to do moving forward.
I'm supportive of going down to 1% with the surprise, and hello, Kevin, for joining us. With the surprise that occurred from Fifth Third, I'm definitely supportive of dropping to 1% or even entertaining the 0%. The only thing that I would like to think, and maybe we could come back if working with Joel and his team, if they identify other needs, potentially looking at what we have available. And if we do need additional dollars, maybe that's where we just revisit it, because we can always revisit with those accounts.
Right.
Craig, I absolutely agree with you. And that's the other thing that we need to make sure for posterity that we're aware of, that just because we declared 2% or 1% or 0 effective the beginning of the fiscal year, that's still funds. Those are still funds that are available. We did the same thing the past couple of years. We've said, let's go 2% and see if we need them. If we need more, we can always go back. And to date, we've never run out that we needed those. Now, the hope is moving forward, and I've got great hope with Joel and working through some of the direction that we're getting now, that I hope we do need it. And I hope we do need to come back and spend more of this available funds, because we're doing things like, catching up on some needed repairs or something that the community wants us to spend in our parks. So I'm comfortable either way. Craig, as long as you know, and I'm assuming there is plenty of unrestricted that in the top part, where if we say 0 distribution today, you've got enough unrestricted money to cover the things that you need that typically, I'm thinking of Fleischman.
Yes, Jim, looking at it, if with the projecting end balance of, say, even 1 million, the total budgeted expenses is 756,000. So even with never mind, we're still getting that 400,000. We'll be fine.
Okay. I'm sort of leaning towards taking 0 right now out of our invested funds. Kevin, you missed the earlier discussion where the city has asked us to move the money sitting in our P&C accounts into city funds, into city accounts, which would then mean, obviously, we don't have these investment vested funds that we have. So we're trying to say, rather than moving into a city account, excess cash, let's hold off on what we don't need to distribute out of these investment funds.
Did the city say why they wanted?
We've been very careful on our words in this meeting. The city would just like those funds under the city control, number one, and number two, the city would like us to show full commissioners fund budgeting in the city system. So like today, when we're talking about a $1.8 million budget of commissioner funds, that will now show up as part of the city's overall all funds budget, Kevin. So I interjected that discussion here into this budget discussion, just so committee members are aware of what we are contemplating here.
So Jim, since I would support your idea of not taking a distribution of 2%, since we're not, the policy is the policy, and we have up to, and as long as we've got the flexibility to revisit this at the next meeting and distribute it if we need it, I think two things. It's best to spend this down if we need it for capital. It's best to leave it in the regular endowment fund if we don't need it. So again, especially since there's flexibility to revisit this in 60 or 90 days.
Don, what's your thought?
I would be with someone mine. I don't think we're diminishing the work of the parks in any way by, as we've discussed in a few different ways, and with some caution, even some margin for error. So I don't think we're diminishing the work of the parks, and we're potentially securing a somewhat improved return, not potentially enormous, but a somewhat improved return. I think it's, as I understand our charter, if you will, I think it's the most consistent to draw as little as we can, consistent with our policy statement, which in this instance, I think is 0.
Okay. Kevin, I know you've jumped in here. I'm sure you've picked up on where we're going. That
Yeah,
okay.
I would agree that leaving it in the funds rather than converting it, especially with all this other stuff going on. I worry from a political basis if a council member who doesn't have any experience with parks and or parks budgeting and or the things that these monies were intended for, they're going to see this money and they're going to cut something else from parks budget saying, well, you got the money in this other fund to pay for that. So because there is no there's much greater visibility on the monies that parks has now than when I was on council. But I don't think there are a lot of people on council that are digging into it. So unless it shows up as a line item in the city budget, they're not going to think of that.
Yeah, that's the discussion. Where if we do move it over, that's one of the drivers, is that moving it over, then we do a all funds budget that would include these additional funds that we have. So I'm also in agreement with the discussion about, at this point, not taking funds out of the endowment funds that we have the trusteeship for, and for all the reasons we've just discussed. And Craig, since you are comfortable as well that you would have funds available to be able to use, knowing that you can always come back in 30, 60, 90 days with hopefully a great use for these funds, we'll be glad to recommend to the commission, that to the park board, that we fully agree we want to spend these funds. So Steve, would you put that into, if you're so inclined, put that into an official motion then?
Where I would move that we distribute 0% from the the 6 named funds of the endowment fund, especially since we have unexpected distribution from the Fifth Third Foundation funds.
Perfect. And a second from,
I'll second.
Kevin beat me to it.
okay. We want to make sure we reflect that Kevin was definitely at the meeting and participated. So Kevin second, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. Craig, you got your recommendation that we'll make to the, assume those are your funds to build into your budget, and we'll make that recommendation to the commission.
Absolutely, and thank you for everybody for the insight, and definitely looking forward to it, and I think it's a wise choice.
Super. Do you have anything else, Craig?
I think the last bullet point was discuss outstanding items and update on park projects.
Sure. I'll take a crack at that. I first want to, in this committee, publicly express gratitude to Mr. John Nyer, who for the past 6 months has been doing double duty for parks and triple duty when you add in his real business. But John really was able to come in and help us in a transition there, and we're all extremely thankful for what you did, John. And
Thank you.
thank you for continuing, especially now when you know how these funds are used on the other side or needed on the other side. Even more benefit to us here on this committee. So thank
Makes
you.
it all the clearer. Absolutely.
Cool. I do want to, the first thing I would like to say is I really want to put a push out to try and get additional committee members for us. As Craig mentioned, the four amigos here with Craig have sort of kept this committee going for the past 4 years. I would love to have a couple other members of this committee just for historical information that gets a grasp of these funds and how it works. So I'll just say again, if you guys can think of people or can call upon your networks to try and find people that we could talk to about joining this committee, I'd appreciate it. So also, as far as park board goes, you all have heard Steve Pasella, who was the a deputy director at CRC, has moved over and will help us cover the director's role until we get a permanent director in place, which Steve has committed to at least through the end of the year. Steve will be with us. So we have an opportunity here to utilize Steve and his knowledge of city procurement and city, how to get things done through the city, and his experience with CRC to help us at parks. Just for your information, John and I are both on the search committee. We're very encouraged with interviews that we have had. We will move into, we're anticipating moving into second interviews hopefully next week. So we are hopeful that we will be able to identify a permanent director in the near term. So we're pretty encouraged by that at this point in time. At the board meeting last week, I did present, and the board adopted a short-term strategic priority list, just so we have, from a park board standpoint, a document that shows where our priorities are. And I don't want to go through all of those with you all. I'll be glad to share those with you if you would like. I can forward that document to you so you can see. But we want to make sure that we get staffing where it needs to be. In the planning and design department, particularly, we are really emphasizing and prioritizing getting that department up to full employment, full staffing. And then we've got some key parks that we need to move forward with, such as Lytle Park. That's been clear now. We've got some proposals in for doing the work at Lytle Park. We have put priority on moving forward with negotiations on the boat dock. Kevin, you remember that project, I believe.
Something about that.
So we're working, continue to work on there.
Jim, on that, do we have an idea of anticipated completion?
Kevin,
The
quite honest,
fire department was just asking me about that again, so.
the biggest issue there that staff is trying to work through is on the permit for operating that boat dock. We thought we had a valid permit,
Yeah, that's what Steve had told us.
right? And it's fuzzy at the moment at best. So we are working with the Corps of Engineers to identify, one, do we have a valid permit in place? And we don't have that decision yet. So Kevin, I think we have seen some real commitment on Hafner's part to continue moving forward with this. We believe that they have exhibited a strong desire to move this project along. But and John would be in a better position than I to know, but what I've been told is that the key issue today is getting clear-cut authority nailed down on a valid permit to operate that boat dock at that location in the Ohio River.
Cool.
Okay. We've got some other key parks. Our International Freedom Park down at the far end of the riverfront parks. We had a waterworks issue where it had to be dug up and a retaining wall put in. It pretty much decimated a large portion of that park. So one of our priorities is to put it back together again. We're working closely with Waterworks, and fortunately, some good news that we just heard last week is that because of an emergency ordinance that was passed, or emergency declaration by the city manager to do the work, we can then also operate in putting it back together again under an emergency authorization, which is going to allow us to quickly go back to, I think I can say this publicly, Human Nature was the landscape architect that worked with us to initially develop and do that property, that park. So we're hoping to be able to just go straight back to them, utilizing the designs and everything were done initially to put it back together. So
Is Waterworks going to pay for the restoration as part of the?
yes. And we're working closely with them, and we just wanted to expedite putting it back together by not having to go out in full bids and all of that stuff. So we'll be able to go back to the original designer and use the original plans to put it back together again. So that's what we hope to do.
Procurement's never an issue, Jim.
No, never. It's gotten much better since we have a new, no, I'm not going to go there. An old park board commissioner was just causing things to slow down so much. And then I think one of the key things is that we have asked, we put a priority on putting a plan together for how we can address the long-term capital needs identified in our third-party infrastructure study that we did. So we've asked the staff and made a priority from the park board to say to staff, come back to us with a plan for how we address those long-term capital needs, meet the immediate repair needs that we have at any point in time in parks, and then still have some funds left over for keeping the parks vital and welcoming to the community, meaning we do some new stuff along the way. So, and the priority that we set with that was that we look at it on equitable spending throughout the system so that parks across the city in all neighborhoods would get some of the love and attention that the parks need. So I think that is the biggest one, I think, in the priorities we established, was to ask for Joel and Steve and the staff to come back with a plan to address those things going forward. I'm blanking on, there's a whole lot. And the other thing that I'll say to you all is that it will become very clear. One of the legacies that John Nyer will leave with us is the hiring of a new head of the planning and design department. And Joel, his name is Joel. Joel will bring us into the 21st century as far as systems, where he will have project planning in place. He will have systems in place so that we can see all of the park projects that are on his plate and have a status for them and a projected cost and all that stuff. So I think it will help Park Board immensely going forward to just be able to say, where do we need capital? Where are you, Joel, on these projects? And help even this committee to anticipate where we may need to help find funding for some of the parks projects. And that will be a huge benefit for all of us going forward. And it will be available so that we're definitely staff and the commissioners will have a read-only. I said, make sure it's read-only access to those files so we can see it. But there was even a discussion about making it even through the city system somehow public, so the public can see what we're working on and make it even more transparent. So that's a real improvement, I think.
Mm.
That's about all I had. Craig or John, anything else of note that we should share at this point?
Can't think of any. I know, did you mention Lido Park?
Yep.
Probably bids, sounds like they've been received and they're pending DCE review.
Yeah.
I would suggest with that, Craig, having someone reach out to John Barrett to let him know that that's happening, because I was talking to him last week and it was somewhat of a sore spot that nothing's happened yet. So
Yeah, the Eagle folks are in probably not weekly, but certainly every other week communication. Paul Silva at Eagle's been on point, and I forget the Jenna Barrett, not John Barrett, but another Michael Barrett or Barnett on the construction side of Eagle has been a regular correspondent with Joel, and I assume Steve as well. So that's they definitely have a sharpened interest to be sure.
and then Mr. President of the Board of Park Commissioners, two other things. One, my weeds on Coleraine Avenue are still growing higher and higher.
I actually saw those yesterday. I drove by and went to the drive-through at Mount Airy, and I saw.
Inside the park looks beautiful.
Yeah. If we can get the citizens of Rayburn to, isn't that part of the homeowners association?
We would love to help. If you guys bring the truck that will keep people away, I can rally the troops to cut those weeds down.
I know you've sent an email, so I will leave that. I don't know where that stands, Kevin. But I did see it, so I'm sure they're getting the attention that you've requested.
And then the other thing was relative to the Board of Visitors. Have we gotten any clarity on that?
Absolutely not. And that's where, Kevin, I might call on you. I need to go through this with Steve Pasella, and I might try and bring you into that conversation. We've heard nothing back. We did meet with Ron Christian, and it was left in his court to come back, and we've heard absolutely nothing back on that. So I don't know when your next meeting is of the BOV, but
I think it's in the fall. That's, I'd like to get this wrapped up. I thought actually the ball was in Parks Court relative to coming up with whatever offsets there might be against the request for funding. If you've got that or can get that together, I could even call a special meeting of the Board of Visitors or ask the chair to call a special meeting so that we could provide those funds
okay.
needed for maintenance, especially as we're getting into the new budget. It would be nice to know that you've got those monies or some portion of those monies.
Yeah. And Kevin, when you say offsets, what are you talking about?
So if you remember, part of your presentation or Parks presentation to the Board of Visitors was, here are all the costs associated with maintaining and ordinary maintenance of Bicentennial Commons.
Yeah.
But then there's rental income and things like that offset some of those costs, or perhaps we hadn't looked at when we had the meeting, we didn't know for sure, but we assumed that, we were only seeing the cost side. We weren't seeing the asset side.
Gotcha.
And we wanted to say, okay, if you've got a request for $100,000, but you've got income of $50,000, then net income of $50,000, then the Board of Visitors would fund $50,000, not $100,000.
Gotcha. Well, I will circle back. I need to get Craig and Steve and I together, and I'll try and loop you in at the same time in that discussion.
Whatever you need.
Perfect.
My big day just happened earlier today, so I've got nothing on my schedule for the rest of it.
There was something about a parking ticket or something you need to
Wondering, because I did have to park on the street, and literally I had to do that 3 separate times.
Gotcha. Okay. I don't think we've got anything else. I would just like to thank you guys. Sorry, I was a bit late as well, Kevin. So I appreciate you guys, and we will keep you informed.
We'll look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Keep Parks being the best. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We just did it.
Sweet. Good meeting, Craig.